Hello and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug McKenzie, and on today's very special episode, we're going to be looking at payments architecture, seeing how it's going to be foundations for faster payments. And joining me here today, I actually have three guests on today's show who are right at the heart of the topic. First, we have Nationwide Building Society, Mark Nalder. Mark, how are you doing here today?
Morning, thank you. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's nice to be on this panel this morning and talk about the future of payments.
Yeah, it's going to be really quite fun because I think there's no better country that does it like we do. And with that in mind, then we also have Shane Warman from Pay.uk. Shane, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing great today. It's a lovely day here in London, and I'm glad to be taking part in this podcast.
Thank you so much, Shane. And finally, we have Andrew Moseley from ACI Worldwide. Andrew, how are you doing here today?
Yeah, very well. Thank you for having me on, Doug. And it's great to be the guys from Pay.uk and Nationwide as well. Thank you.
It should make for an absolutely brilliant podcast. So guys, with that in mind then, I kind of want to start off with a kind of positive vibe. And Shane, if I could come to you first on this, what are the biggest opportunities from the new payments architecture here in the UK?
Well, it's interesting that you use the word opportunities because the opportunities to the industry are also threats to some of the current users of those platforms. So I guess the biggest opportunities come around the use of data. But in order to use that data, so there's additional data because of a movement to ISO 20022, and that will enable all sorts of things. But in order to do that, people are going to have to agree to share their data and allow it to be used. So that's why I say that some of the opportunities are also threats to some of the people who currently use faster payments. So as far as individual things go, so the key drivers for it are opening up the system to more users, giving a better end user experience to the end users, particularly around things like fraud prevention, personalized journeys, so being able to personalize the end user journeys for people. So those are some of the opportunities that we see to the industry.
Absolutely brilliant. And also, Andrew, if I could get your spin on it as well as from ACI Worldwide, what do you see the biggest opportunities to?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with a lot of the points that Shane raised. I mean, particularly around the richness of the data available in ISO 20022 standards. I mean, just a little bit of my background. I worked at ACI for a number of years, both here in Europe and Australia. So I was actually working for ACI in Australia when they went through their sort of faster payments equivalent journey with the new payments platform, which was moving to ISO 20022. I mean, they moving from not same day payments to real time payments, and the richness of the data available and the sort of overlay services they could build on top of the payment rails because of that was fantastic back in 2018. And they've had 4 great years of their faster payment system. So competition, absolutely, but interoperability with other schemes. But I think the innovation that the new payment infrastructure will enable participants, hopefully more participants, as the sort of scheme opens up, will be fantastic going forward.
Very exciting. And Mark, with that in mind, then we've heard changes to experience, changes to fraud, richness of data. But what I love to bring out on the virtual arena is looking at that end consumer, the person that's got all their life savings, or I think for you guys, they're obviously is it members that they call them at Nationwide?
We're members, yeah, we have members.
Amazing, yeah. So let's talk about the real people on the street or the businesses. What's this going to mean for those people?
Well, I think first I agree with a lot of the points that Shane and Andrew made. I think totally agree with the opportunity and the threat, but the opportunity for consumers is huge. And I think the enrichment of the data, the opportunity that the additional security around fraud, having that confidence that you can pay someone immediately effectively with that additional confidence of fraud risk, or with that that extra data that we'll have available, we'll be able to do additional fraud checks and so I think from a consumer point of view, it's quite interesting. It does create potential competition in the future for other payment types. And we talk a lot about car payments and whether the new payments architecture can provide a real competitive option for consumers, and merchants, I guess, around a true competitor to cards. So there's an opportunity there. But I think just giving consumers more choice.
Interesting,
more choice and more confidence in the ability. Payments isn't like it was 20 years ago, where it took 3 days to get some, or you wrote a check, or payments is just it felt like payments is just everything you do every day now. We probably walked in the office today. Shane's probably used his card 3 or 4 times. That's it's just part of everyday life now. Payments, rather than being a big thing, and I think we just need to make that feel like that for all consumers.
Yeah, I totally agree with the choice thing, and I think it was not to bring the pandemic up too much, but especially in 2020 when we were finally allowed back in the pubs, and suddenly they were said, "Oh yeah, but you have to use QR code." I think a lot of Brits were like, "What the hell is this?" But then suddenly, oh, it's easy because I can now go to the pub, and people suddenly embrace it. And I think it's interesting to see these cultural changes coming through in payments, and people suddenly realizing, oh, this is what how I can pay. I actually like to pay it this way. And Andrew, you were bringing up obviously cross-border payments, especially with the interoperability there. And we all know that payments went through a huge fintech change, especially when it came to cross-border, with a lot of organizations that brought that out. So it's just this culmination of all these things. So I think that's absolutely amazing. Now, with that in mind, and Andrew, obviously you brought up the fact that you've seen the changes happening in Australia, now here in the UK. The pace of change has just been so brutal. Especially if you consider payments hasn't really changed much in the 20 years previous, and now suddenly it's going through a wealth of changes. So with that in mind then, Andrew, what do we need to be conscious of to continue this pace of innovation when it comes to the architecture side of payments?
Yeah, I mean, it's as everyone knows, it's a hugely busy time right now, not just in the UK, but globally around real-time payments. Obviously here in the UK, we've got the SWIFT move to ISO 20022 for cross-border payments later this year. We've got obviously the UK RTGS CHAPS renewal program ongoing, starting later this year or April next year. So hugely busy. So I think it's critical, and I know, Shane could probably talk better about this, but I know it's obviously been key for the Pay.UK and the Bank of England to really align in terms of the evolution over the next few years, because for participants who sit across both schemes and other schemes, it's there's a lot to do. I mean, that was my experience and our experience of our customers in Australia. And Australia was just one example. I mean, they had the benefit of almost going from, they didn't have the sort of legacy scheme dating back to 2008. So ISO 2002, their timing was very good. Here in the UK, we've got a fantastic scheme. Obviously 14 years in production. And I think from a consumer perspective as well, in terms of, they don't really know what they don't know. So they've got a good experience currently. So I completely agree with Mark. The experience is good, but I think they'll be blown away by the experience once the MPA ecosystem is in place. What they can actually do and what participants can actually add on top of those rails will be just amazing. And certainly that's what's happened in other markets in terms of the overlays. Fraud is key as well. I mean, that's always been our experience of our customers globally as they've moved into real-time payments. Fraud follows very closely behind. So I know with things like confirmation of payee, industry is right on top. And I think, we've learned from experiences from other markets as well. So, I think the key message there is just to be aligned with what's happening, not just in the UK, but globally. And the pace of change, well, I think we're all chomping at the bit really to actually get MPA up and running. And I know Shane and his colleagues are doing fantastic work sort of driving that through to its timeline.
Yeah, so just a couple of things. Mark heard me say this before. With the change that we got, we need to be cognizant of the amount of change that's going on in the industry. So I think you've mentioned RTGS too. You've mentioned SWIFT. You've mentioned us. There is a concern that we're all fishing in the same pool for resources. So in order to keep the pace of change, or actually make sure the change is successful, I think us as a core infrastructure provider, we need to be cognizant of all that other change, and we're trying to align the work that we're doing with the work that's happening at the Bank of England and the work that's happening at SWIFT, because actually most end users, they don't care about the rails. They are rail agnostic. In fact, they don't even know about them. What they expect though is when they do make a payment that it's safe and it's secure and it's those are the things that they care about.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we continue the robustness of the payment rails that we have in the UK, whilst also doing what we've said here about the pace of change of enabling innovation. And it's doing those things in that safe, secure way, which I think is the key thing for us as a core infrastructure provider.
Yeah, it's a hard task, isn't it? As you guys have mentioned, the end consumer isn't aware of all of this, but when it doesn't work, that's when they suddenly care. So it's a thankless task. And I guess, Mark, I'd also like your perspective on this question as well. And we've heard from both Andrew and Shane that fraud really is the key. And so, can you take us through what it means for Nationwide and how you help your customers with this ever evolving effective fraud? I wanted to say industry there, but you know what I mean.
Fraud prevention.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is an industry. That's the unfortunate nature of fraud. And what we've seen over the last kind of what we saw 15, 20 years ago with cards, that we saw with checks as well. That fraud is now moving into the fast payment space. And Andrew touched on confirmation of payee. It's done a great job in terms of reducing that fraud. But we are seeing a lot of APP scams. Romance scams are typical. The fraudsters are really clever. So it's really hard having a conversation. I'm absolutely all for moving forward innovation and fast payments being immediate. But actually, if you take a step back and go, for a very, very small percentage of transactions, we're going to take a bit more time on this. And I think most, if I'm buying something for £10, online, or I'm paying Shane, a fiver, that's low risk, right? If I'm paying someone I've never paid before for £20,000, as a consumer, I'll be like, I'm okay if that takes a few hours.
Yeah.
But I think we just need to, with innovation, doesn't mean everything has to be straight away.
Yeah.
There's no harm in, having taking a risk approach around, certain types of payments. If you're paying a new payee, for example, well, why can't we do extra checks? Why can't it's just, I think, keeping our our members informed of that. And it's not always easy. And we've had count hundreds of examples where I've seen cases where the customer's been in the branch and begged for this transaction to go through, and we've been telling them, no, we're convinced this is fraud. No, and it's gone through and it's unfortunately been fraud. So you can only do so much, but I think the more we can do, as part of what we're doing, the ISO will absolutely, that enriched data will absolutely help with that. Confirmation of payee, all these things will add an extra level of security and to the consumers. But fraud is absolutely the format for Shane. We've been in loads of workshops together. Every single workshop that we have around the new payments architecture, fraud comes up. It's the key use case. It's the key thing we need to nail. If you have to give consumers confidence in that payment type. We saw it with contactless. That slow step up, sort of 10, 12 years ago from contactless. As soon as consumers get comfortable with using a payment and it's secure, then it takes off. And I think we'll see the same with fast payments. Get it under control, give consumers confidence, then it will just grow and grow.
Yeah,
very exciting.
I'm with you, Mark. I think doing an excellent job with fraud prevention will allow us to innovate, because it will give us the right, or it'll give us the permission, or give people confidence that we know what we're doing. And we can do it in a safe and a secure way.
And you're right, Shane. It's all driven by consumer right. Consumers will drive, the uses of it, and if it's safe and secure, our members will get confidence, and innovation will just come from that.
Well, it speaks to kind of what we were talking about earlier, and there's this cultural shift in payments. And Shane, I know you brought up the fact that the end consumer is rail agnostic, but people now have their preferences on how they want to pay. And you can look at various different countries have been taking payments in various different ways. And I think I heard Brazil had buy now, pay later in the 70s. So Shane, do you think we're actually going to see these payment rails continue to diverge? Are we going to get to a point where suddenly when you go on holiday, because that country's gotten so accustomed to a certain type of payment, the architecture's just not going to match up?
I don't actually think that is related to the rails that sits on it. So if you look at a Singapore if you look at particularly Asia, where you can pay using a QR code, that usually sits on top of that people see that as a different service, but it actually sits on top of usually a real-time payments rail. Which is why I keep going back to being it's rail agnostic. Whatever name you give something, it doesn't matter what rail you put it on. I mean, heaven forbid me saying this, but you could do all those things via either the real-time rails we have here, or by the card rails. So the end consumer just cares about that it's safe, secure, and works.
Very exciting.
So that's what we've got to. The people who build the solutions on top of that build the solutions that the consumers use will be looking for different things, and they may make a choice on what rails that they want that to go on, and it could be based on cost, efficiency, security. So we've got.
It's excellent to hear this collaboration in finance, and especially when it comes to fraud. Seeing various institutions come together and actually conversing and talking about it, because it is everyone's fighting towards the same goal, and that is fraud prevention.
Just on the cultural thing. So look, I think all around the world we're trying to solve different problems, and there are different problems in each market. So
sure.
We don't necessarily have the same level of people that are excluded from the finance system that they did in Asia, which is where in the likes of Thailand and that, when they rolled out real-time payments, it really allowed people to begin to collect money and open bank accounts. We have a different problem here, and I guess the biggest problem we've got at the moment is what Mark and Andrew have talked about, which is fraud prevention. So that's the thing that we need to crack first.
I'm very excited.
Shane, and what Shane's saying is certainly our experience at ACI Worldwide. As a global company, we believe that localized payments culture and preference is to be expected, and that will always be the case. But as Shane said, from a payments rail perspective, as a consumer, that's not really important to them. It's all about the experience. So you'll get that slightly different, sort of localized experiences. But I think the key thing with what's happening with the MPA is that the sort of harmonization as markets have already moved to ISO 20022 some many years ago. The US market is right in, has done it to some degree, and obviously with the FedNow pilot right now, which we're involved in. So I don't think the rails is the issue. I think it's important around the interoperability. So the messaging standard is the same wherever you go, and therefore the experience, whilst a little bit different locally, that we still could be supported. Well,
Andrew, you brought up FedNow, for instance, and I'm really excited to kind of to find out more about what this is going to mean for cross-border payments, for instance. We've been talking about interoperability, but this is probably one big pain point a lot of users have found when making a payment. If they want to make it cross-border, it's often been the hardest part. So how are we going to see NPA evolve when it comes to cross-border payments, and are we going to see these all these different payments architectures actually correlate to enhance that?
Our experience, and Mark touched upon it a little bit. Obviously, faster payments, NPA is very much around account-to-account payments. But, I think our view, and certainly ourselves and other companies, are very much positioned around, from a solution perspective, which is what ACI does, to really enterprise payments. So any payment type, doesn't really matter whether it's a high-value payment, a low-value payment, a card payment, an account payment, whether it's real-time or near real-time, it's a payment. So over time, they will come together, and I think by having standards such as ISO 20022 will certainly facilitate and accelerate that. Whether we ever reach the sort of nirvana of like a single rail for all payment types, I doubt I've been in payments for over 30 years, and probably another 30 years before we get there. But I think every step we make, and I think here in the UK we've led the way to a large degree through through very innovative customers like Mark with Nationwide, and through the bodies such as Pay.UK. So I think we're in a really good place, with what's happening, in the next 2 or 3 years for MPA, and with cross-border payments, with what Swift's doing. It's all coming together. So it remains to be seen how interoperability really plays out, but we're moving in the right direction is our view.
I'd echo those comments, Andrew. I think for me, the key is ISO, right? Getting a single message format for all of that, all types of payments across, it is key. Will we ever get to Andrew's point? I don't think we will. I don't think we need to. I think, I think if you went out to single rail, you'd limit competition. And actually, I think competition is healthy. I think that's really important. I think you get a concentration which I don't think we want to see in the industry. So I don't think we need to get to a single rail. I think competition is good. I think I agree with Andrew. I think the key for me is getting to a single message format, and then it gives you so much opportunity around interoperability. Like you said, it drives resilience. It gives consumers confidence that they're around. Honestly, they don't care. They're seeing the same sort of format of message and opportunity. So I absolutely agree. I think ISO is the key to taking us in the right direction. But I don't think we need to go to a single rail, and I think competition is healthy.
Well, with that in mind, then, I mean, Mark, my next question was going to say, what is ISO 20022 going to mean actually for the end consumer? But as you've mentioned, it doesn't really change much for them. But I imagine it's going to change a lot for you guys. What's it going to mean for you on the back end?
Well, I think it could mean so much for the consumer. In terms of it could change the prioritization of payments. It could change. So you could put additional level of security for certain types of payments. Building up a consumer profile of the types of payments they do with the data adds so much opportunity. It doesn't feel that far away, and we see it today. People have I guess preferences in how they spend their money, but with that enriched data, you can definitely start to see a scenario where we start to build a profile to consumers and how they spend and where they can maybe save money in the future and get offers and stuff. So I think there's a real there's definitely a focus on like reducing fraud and prioritization and all that kind of stuff. But actually, I think there is a real opportunity to really understand your consumers, our members, better with the extra data that possibly will give us.
Yeah, I mean, could it almost get to the point where, for instance, small businesses could attach invoices to a payment message and really help with the kind of money flow that way?
Absolutely. I think, in the SME market, I think, Shane will be smiling there because that's definitely hey, but absolutely, it's a real opportunity for the SME market to really, and it starts to really kind of flow through the end-to-end journey. Going to my earlier point around payments isn't a big thing anymore. It's just part of a journey.
Correct.
Actually, invoice thing is a great example where I get my windows cleaned. I get an email, text from the window cleaner with an invoice, and you just pay it. That's just part of and here's your next booking for your next. That a good example of it's just part of the journey, and within that there's a payment. But for the consumer, it doesn't feel like a payment. It just feels like having a conversation with the
business.
Absolutely.
I mean, because we already kind of have that facility here with request to pay, so that's not quite at the level of functionality that could be used when we move to ISO. But yeah, it's definitely already there. I think actually that's one of the strongest use cases in the SME market is definitely around providing an efficient way of sending people invoices and capturing them, and I guess getting them paid.
It should be, because it has been such, I think it's fair to say, maligned part of banking in previous years. And I think what I was very excited by, and Mark, I've spoken to colleagues of yours who have had a huge impact on the SME market in helping businesses go through probably the toughest 2 years of their existence. It's been fascinating to see how banking and payments, these two verticals, have come together to create real human relief stories, and it's been absolutely brilliant. Now, Shane, we keep hearing about in this conversation about how great ISO 20022 is going to be. And I know obviously we've talked about measured change as well, but am I being unfair here? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Has it been a disjointed effort by the institutions to get on board with this payment standard?
I'm not quite sure it's been disjointed. I think given the amount of change that's going on, we need to make sure that it's coordinated.
Yeah.
I know that we keep talking about a standard, but I think, Andrew, given your involvement globally, it's a standard, but not quite everyone's using it exactly the same way, because every market I've been to, there's been a slight variation of how they implemented it.
Right.
But in the UK, we have the working groups that the Bank of England have set up. We're making sure, we use the CHAPS ISO message, I guess the standards they created as as a starting point for what we're going to use in the MPA. I think that level of coordination is there. So I wouldn't necessarily call it disjointed. I mean, you can always do things better in hindsight, can't we?
Yeah, so it again, it has to be measured, and finding that balance is what, that's why we pay you guys the big bucks. It's exciting to see what's happening. And Andrew, I'd love to see, obviously your perspective, as Shane was alluding to, this worldwide perspective of the kind of implementation of it.
Yeah, look, I think having come from other markets and been here in the UK since 2020, again, I agree with Shane. I've not seen it in the 2 years I've sort of really been exposed to it. I know MPA has been sort of talked about for a few years before that, but I wouldn't call it disjointed either. I think it's been carefully thought out. I mean, Shane mentioned the sort of collaboration with the Bank of England to make sure that leveraging the sort of same messaging standards as much as possible. So, and not everyone's starting from the same position, obviously in different markets. I mentioned Australia a few times. They were coming from pretty much nothing from a faster payments perspective to their new payments platform, whereas here we obviously have faster payments, 3.5 billion transactions last year. So it's a very successful, very mission critical system. So you've got to tread very carefully when you move to a new standard, to effectively what is a new scheme with a new central infrastructure that's being procured right now. So everyone would be great if it was, could happen sooner. But with our customers, and I think we have two of the largest customers here in the UK for faster payments, it has a huge impact. And obviously alongside what's happening with CHAPS and SWIFT, there's a lot going on. So I think working collaboratively across the industry would ensure that what we end up with is I guess, the right payments ecosystem. It's secure, it's resilient, it's robust. It promotes competition and innovation, and it's successful. So I think it's moving at the right pace, which is great.
Absolutely amazing. And I guess Mark, have you got any words?
Mark would like it to move faster.
No, Shane, I think because whilst we all want to get to the end game, because it's really exciting, and for both us as a business site and our members and what we can offer, we've got a responsibility to our members to make sure it's safe and secure. These migrations, and Andrew, you touched on it, this is effectively a payment scheme. We don't do this very often, and you've got to get it right. We've seen major scheme outages, in the cards rail in the last few years, 15-minute outage, with cards, I remember the day, from 5 years ago, it caused all sorts of problems. We can't have that kind of outage. We can't, so whilst, yes, it's taken longer than I personally like, and I'm really respectful, and I've been in the industry for 30 plus years as well, and this takes time. We've got to get it right. This is the foundation of the next 20, 30 years of payments, and rather take a bit longer and get it right for our members.
And as you said, it's to make sure that your members have the best possible.
And I think Angie touched on it. Not everyone's starting from the same starting point. I think I agree. It's not disjointed. It's just hard, because you have got people that absolutely who want to go quicker because they've got limited infrastructure in place, so they can go quicker. Fintech compared to a top tier bank, where they've got and the top tier bank are also trying to do the RTGS, the chat, all these things at the same time, whereas someone else with fintech might just want to, So I think one of the biggest challenges for Shane and the team is to try and get a timeline that suits everyone. Shane, I know we've had this discussion many times, but
tell me about it.
That would be the biggest challenge, because Shane touched on it earlier. We're all looking at the same resources, the same the same vendors, same providers. So it's a challenge, but the opportunity is massive. And yes, slightly quicker would be great, but I'm conscious that you can get it wrong. Because if you get it wrong, you lose consumer confidence straight away, and it takes a long time, if ever, to recover.
So the one thing I would say, so we have I've been involved in the rollout in a few markets around the world. We, I think, are the first market to change our system, and that comes with additional complexities, because when you're creating a scheme from scratch in your greenfield environment, it does it does make life simpler because we've already got an existing system in place. And as both Andrew and Mark said, we're moving from one message format to another. That does come with additional complexity in it. Sure. Because and that's another thing. That's possibly the thing that is the most complex about what we're doing here.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today on the VA. It's actually been such a pleasure talking to you guys and hearing your insights and knowing that what's coming ahead for the consumer in the future. And I also want to say a massive thank you to our viewers as well. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at FF News, of course YouTube, but especially LinkedIn, where you'll see me in the comments and hopefully these guys too. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Andrew, Mark and Shane, hope you've had a good time. Goodbye.
Thanks guys, thanks Doug, thanks Andrew, thanks Mark.
Yeah.